I have to take you back to 1987 for this one. A year burned into my memory for reasons I'll never escape. At the time, I was living in Marshfield, Wisconsin, sharing a cramped apartment with several roommates. Life was messy and exhausting. I was only 20, balancing 2 jobs, stumbling through my responsibilities, barely keeping my head above water. Most nights, I came home and collapsed straight into bed. But Sunday, December 6th, 1987, was different. Dragging myself home from a long shift, I opened the door and was immediately swallowed by chaos. Laughter, shouting, music so loud it shook the walls. Our apartment had turned into a madhouse, packed with bodies, most of them underage. The air reeked of beer and sweat, and broken glass littered the floor. I was too exhausted to fight it. I grabbed a drink, claimed a corner, and watched as the night blurred into noise and exhaustion. Then, just after midnight, the inevitable happened. The police showed up. And just like that, the party evaporated. Strangers scattered into the night like frightened animals, leaving behind only the sour stench of spilled alcohol and silence heavy enough to ring in my ears. By morning, I was furious. The place was trashed, bottles everywhere, crushed cups, food ground into the carpet. I was muttering curses under my breath, blaming my roommates, when there came a knock at the door. 3 people stood there. One of them was Brian, tall, wiry, with a boyish face that didn't match the sharp, dangerous edge in his eyes. 2 girls hovered beside him, giggling, casual. They asked if they could come in, hang out for a while. Something in me bristled. I was tired, bitter, unwilling to host strangers in the wreckage of last night's chaos. So I told them no. They looked disappointed, but left without protest. I locked the door and thought little of it. Until early Tuesday morning, December 8th. I woke to pounding at the door. Not friendly knocking. This was the kind of pounding that makes your blood run cold. Police. Get dressed, you're coming with us. Confused, groggy, we were herded into cars and taken to the station. No explanations, just stern silence. My pulse was hammering. Then, at the station, the truth unraveled. Brian. The boyish-faced young man who'd stood at my doorway hours earlier had murdered his mother. Here's what happened. On his way to the party Sunday night, he'd gotten a flat tire. Police caught him with alcohol, underage, and brought him in. His mother had to pick him up. But when they got home, an argument exploded. The details are blurred, but what followed wasn't an accident, nor a moment of simple rage. Brian snapped. He grabbed a baseball bat, struck his mother in the head, then strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. He later claimed he didn't mean to kill her, but the brutality told a different story. Violence so ferocious it erased any shadow of doubt. And then, hours later, he was standing at my door. That realization struck me like ice water. He had looked so casual, so ordinary. He asked to come in as if nothing had happened, as if his hands weren't already stained with his mother's blood. The girls with him had no idea. They laughed, joked, carried on, while right beside them stood a killer. Not long after leaving my apartment, Brian and the girls were caught near Pittsville, heading west toward the Iowa border, fleeing, running from what he'd done. But what haunts me most isn't the murder itself. It's the thought of how close I came to letting him in, to sharing a room, a drink, maybe even laughter, with someone who had just taken a life. One small decision, to say no, was the only thing that kept me from being pulled deeper into his nightmare. Now, decades later, I still think about that December, about Brian's mother, about the final horrific moments she must have endured, and about Brian himself, a man who appeared so unremarkable, yet carried a darkness I will never fully understand. I think about the knock on my door, how ordinary it seemed, how trivial, and how it might have been the most important decision of my life. Because sometimes it isn't the big choices that decide our fate. Sometimes it's the simple, almost forgettable ones, like refusing to open the door. And that thought chills me more than anything else. I still remember how small everything felt back then. The high school halls like narrow arteries. Every face a fleeting silhouette in the fluorescent hum. Freshman year, I put people on pedestals without knowing why. Alyssa was one of those people, a senior. Effortlessly flawless, confident, impossibly stylish, the kind of presence that seemed to rearrange a room the moment she walked in. To me, she wasn't just popular, she was untouchable, a private sun I watched from a distance. I was painfully shy. Seniors were intimidating enough. Alyssa was on another plane. I never expected anyone to see me the way I saw her. So when, in my senior year, I began finding little notes in my locker, I felt stunned and oddly exposed. It started small, one neat scrap that said, "You were beautiful in that dress on Friday." The handwriting was careful, the message punctuated with a tiny heart. After that, they kept coming. Always slipped into my locker between fourth period classes, always unsigned. They were harmless at first. Your smile lights up the hallway. You shine brighter than any star. Your homecoming photos are straight off a magazine cover. They read like things I might have written to Alyssa in some alternate life. They weren't overtly flirtatious. They were disarmingly familiar, like a person who had been watching and cataloging me, turning observations into compliments. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want my friends to turn it into a spectacle or to humiliate whoever was leaving them. So I kept the notes tucked away, a secret ledger of small, flattering sentences. In the second semester, my schedule changed. My last class shifted upstairs. My locker sat in someone else's orbit. I forgot about the notes, the thrill flattening into a memory, until my 18th birthday. That morning, my friend handed me a note she'd found in my old locker, the one where all the other messages had appeared. "Happy birthday, Princess." At first, she thought the notes had been meant for her. The compliments could have fit any of us. But when she realized the birthday wasn't hers, the pieces fell into place. Naturally, my friends didn't resist playing detective. One girl, whose schedule left her free during fourth period, staked out the lockers like a private investigator. It didn't take long. The notes weren't from a shy underclassman, and they weren't from a secret admirer of my own age. They were coming from someone older, a woman on the night crew, one of the janitors. We all recognized her, but none of us had ever spoken to her. She'd been leaving notes for months, watching closely enough to comment on my outfits, my field hockey games, even things I posted on Facebook. I saw her at the last game of the season, sitting quiet and still in the stands, as though she belonged to the shadows there. That was the only time I ever noticed her looking directly at me. At the time, I didn't think to tell a teacher or report it.
My teenage brain called it flattering more than creepy, and I was ashamed of feeling exposed. Now, older, I can see the wrongness threaded through those gestures. She hadn't broken any law that I knew of. She left notes, she watched, but the intimacy of it felt corrosive, like someone quietly redrawing the boundary lines of my life. What chills me now is not just the memory of the notes, but how easily admiration and attention slipped into something else. I don't know whether I was an isolated case, or if she left the same trail of compliments for other students. I don't know whether those gentle words were the end of it, or the beginning of an escalation I never witnessed. I only know how it felt, strange, a little depraved, and deeply personal in a way that made me both flattered and sick. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about the way I accepted it, how I tucked the notes away like little secrets, how I rationalized the surveillance by calling it admiration. It feels naive now. The line between attention and possession is thinner than I once believed. And knowing that I once felt flattered by someone who watched me in quiet, patient increments leaves a residue I can't fully scrub away.
I still replay that Saturday night in my head, the way it unspooled like a cheap horror movie that I couldn't switch off. I'd been working as a tutor during the week, but on weekends I babysat for family friends. The two boys, Chris and Kevin, were mostly harmless. Chris was old enough to be mostly self-sufficient, but not quite old enough to watch his younger brother alone. Usually, babysitting was easy money, background noise to a night of homework and cartoons. That night felt different from the moment I drove up the long, lonesome driveway. Their house sat apart from everything else, old, isolated, ringed by dilapidated outbuildings, a sagging silo, leaning sheds, and a massive barn that loomed like a dead sentinel. The place belonged in the kind of film where someone says, "It's just the house," and then something very much is not just the house. Old timber creaked under its own memory. Shadows pooled in corners. My skin prickled the instant I stepped inside. I told myself I was being dramatic. Old houses make noise, the mind supplies monsters. But I refused to spend the night there. That evening began ordinary enough. Kevin darted around full of child star energy, asking me to help him root through his costume collection in the basement. Knights, pirates, soldiers. Once he had nearly given me a heart attack by jumping out in an ultra-realistic soldier costume, complete with a replica musket that looked frighteningly genuine. So when he asked for help finding a particular piece, I agreed, more to save face than because I trusted the footlights of my imagination. The basement lived up to its reputation. Junk leaned against damp walls, weird shadows skittered from strip lights, and the air smelled of old wood and forgotten things. We pushed deeper into the gloom. Kevin rummaged through bins, his small hands producing a parade of costumes. Then a sound. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, right above us. For a beat, I convinced myself it was Chris. Then Chris walked into the doorway behind me. He looked pale and confused, which only made the silence stretch thinner. "That's not me," he said. The three of us froze. We listened. Above us, the footfalls came again, measured, almost ceremonial. My throat closed. For a second, a weird, absurd calm washed over me. I remember thinking, this is how it ends. Then instinct took over. I wasn't going to be a passive victim. I scanned the room for a weapon and found a crowbar lying among the debris. its presence inexplicable, its weight reassuring. I clutched it. I told the boys to stay close. Something else tugged at me. Lily, the family's golden retriever, whose bark could lift a roof, was unnaturally quiet. She barked at squirrels, at the mailman, at the faintest breeze, but not a sound now. Her silence felt like a punctuation mark, wrong, deliberate. I told myself maybe the noises were outside, under the porch, maybe a delivery truck. Rationalizations are warm blankets when your spine is prickling. We went back upstairs. Lily lay on the rug, limp in a way that made my stomach lurch. For one terrible moment, I thought she was dead. I touched her shoulder. She stirred, deflated my fear in a single animal breath. I checked the porch. No package, no footprints. Still, the unease refused to leave. Then Lily erupted into frantic barking. A knock at the door followed. Crowbar in my hand, I peered through the frosted glass. A shadowy figure stood on the porch, male, indistinct. I called out, "Who is it?" "Pizza delivery," came the reply. The kids didn't have phones. The parents would have told me if they'd ordered anything. My grip tightened. "We didn't order pizza," I said. The man's answer surprised me. He didn't press. "Oh, sorry, my mistake." He turned and walked away. I watched him through the glass. He carried nothing, no box, no bag, and there was no car parked on the long drive. He simply drifted into the dark. It was small things, odd things, that piled up until they became a mountain of wrongness. Later, after the boys were asleep, I kept vigil in the living room with the crowbar and a kitchen knife within reach. Around midnight, something sounded outside. At first, I told myself it was an owl. The call was too deliberate, too timed, too human. Curiosity dragged me to the door again. I cracked it and shone my phone's flashlight into the black. Two eyes reflected back, eye level, glassy, unmoving, staring straight at me. I slammed the door, locked it, and shoved a chair against it like a child barricading down the hatches. I double-checked every window and every lock. The house seemed to breathe around me. Every creak was a sentence in a story I hadn't chosen. My ears refused to stop listening. I sat on the couch with my weapons and watched the digital clock tick. 12:14, 12:23, 12:59. The parents came a little after 1, their faces cheerfully oblivious. I told them about the footsteps, the knock, the eyes. They shrugged. "Old houses make noises," they said. Then muttered that they'd heard strange sounds outside a few nights earlier, but didn't think anything of it. Maybe it's that comforting shrug that makes the ordinary dangerous. Denial is a protective film over dread. I took my pay, left the crowbar in the foyer, and fled that house as fast as I could. That was the last time I babysat for them. Years later, I still think about that night. The footsteps above the basement, the man who said he was delivering pizza when no pizza existed, the owl call that wasn't an owl, and most of all, those eyes at my height in the dark. They felt patient, like a thing that had been rehearsing its presence. Were those incidents connected? I'll never know. Maybe one person was testing the edges of fear. Maybe more than one. Maybe no one at all, and my mind stitched patterns where none existed. But there is one certainty. It wasn't an owl. Some nights, when silence presses close and the house creaks, I can still feel the weight of those eyes reflecting in the dark, and the knowledge that sometimes danger comes not as a scream, but as a careful knock and a wrong, soft voice claiming to deliver something ordinary. It's the ordinary, that is the most treacherous.